Dear Sat Shree, in having another dead loved one pass recently, I began to wonder what happens when the soul leaves the body and the reincarnation process. I have had communications with my aunt since her passing. If the soul moves on from her physical body to someone else, how is it that I'm still in contact with her? What can you share about this? Thank you. Love, Jolene.
Ah, Jolene. I mean, I know what this is. It's like a delightful quality of your own knowing that's already there. And this sense that nobody goes anywhere is actually the truth. That's my experience. That's the truth. But I also want to let you know that you're at a certain stage in the development, which I experienced, where the being is beginning to expand in its universal nature. And usually the universe gives you death and dying as the arena which you can serve. And how do you serve that? By being there for that. So the people who are like pulled to doing hospice work, people who come to the spiritual path, they find this wonderful satisfaction in being able to be present with the soul when it makes this transition. Because at least the psychic level, it knows it's moving, even if the human level may have some grief or concern for the person in this dying process. So you become a grease on the movement through the bardos for that soul when you're attending to that. Physical attention or just thinking of them becomes an access to this. And it was very dramatic. I had a dramatic point when both my first wife and I were sitting outside in my little house in Sacramento where I was running programs for Sri Amananda when we heard that my son's body had been found. And he had been dead for 3 days. And the second that happened for me, I felt him come through my body and right up to his state that he had before he took birth. And I was like, that was right there in that moment. And my first wife went into a wailing, a cry of anguish and grief that had basically ended her spiritual journey. But in that moment, I had never heard crooning. The crooning for the recently departed. Grief at a level of anguish that's unspeakable. Only later did I realize that she had betrayed him by turning against him and joining his wife in her resentment of him. And it was her guilt that made the crooning so painful. But it was a healing too. It eventually allowed her to heal. But for me, it was this, wow. And then of course it took a while. It took us some months later, or actually maybe a year later, before they started showing up. You know, it showed up because, you know, we're linked. And he'd come back, and I was his teacher before he died. He had turned to me. So he was linked with me, even though he came to his own place. He would just come and say hi and play and dance and all of that. That's been true for everyone who has passed around me, is really just, it's over. You know, the hard part is being in the human life. The death part's easy. You don't have to change it all. As a matter of fact, can't really change in that dimension. Only here can you actually evolve. So there's a relaxation and a relief, and then you get to open up to all those qualities of being that were not accessible to you in the course of your life. Many people can come to this in the spiritual path, that freedom of the psychic being, you know, having after death experience where a person dies and then they come back, and when they died they had relatives come and visit them, and they had this beautiful light, and then, you know, they saw these wonderful worlds. That's true. That's what you do in the intermediary stage. That's very close to this dimension. It can, for some people, it can be just quite wonderful. You lift it up, but then you got to go through your bardo, so you still have yet the hard work to do. But a few go all the way. They go all the way up. So death becomes a part of the work of one who is transiting out of their individual awakened being into their universal nature, where the individual soul is becoming the soul, the Atman. And then you become an agency for that principle to bring healing to those who transitions. In tribes, it was the shaman that had that quality of consciousness. But often fear of death and fear of dying was much stronger in the indigenous traditions than, especially prematurely, than maybe it is available to us. Most of us live without any question that we live forever, even though our bodies will die. So we have a shock when the body gets injured or an accident or disease. Then it brings you right back down to that tribal kind of consciousness as, oh my God, I could die. Your own death is actually the real interesting time. I've had a number of experiences in my life where I had been poisoned when I took some LSD, and I spent 8 hours basically going into contractions and spasms, uncontrollable spasms, where everything would stop and I would be strangled, and I thought, okay, that's it, I'm dying right here. And it went on for 8 hours. When I came out, it was like, I guess I died and came back. Very soon after that, I met Maribamba. So it probably was a death event, that I was poisoned, but somehow I lived. So these things happen when we're in our own embodiment, and when we're in our being, we become an agency for other souls to go through that particular trauma that's mostly cellular, and be able to more gracefully ease. When the body ages naturally, in a healthy way, it's easier for the soul to depart. It's ready, it's like ripe, it's ready to let the soul go. But at earlier stages of life, then there's more resistance because life force is still trying to express itself. So being there helps the soul in that way. Even if outwardly they're still in pain, they're still in fear, they're still in whatever they may be, your presence becomes the solace for them. And that's where you are, Jolene. And you've had exposure before meeting me with this, so I know this is not new for you. But it's good to share this with everyone else. Oh, there she is. I see you. You're there. In my locating, you're over there. You're locating, I'm over here, right there. Here I am. That's the thing about time and space. All right.